The year is 1580. If you could rise above the earth, you'd see something that no one had ever witnessed before. Spanish flags flying across continents, from Mexico City to Manila, from Naples to the silver mines of Potosi, one king, Philip II of Spain, rules an empire where the sun never sets. How did this happen? How did a small kingdom on Europe's edge become the world's first superpower? Spain's empire wasn't just built on power. It was built on a colossal vision, a deadly conquest, and untold riches. But here's the kicker. The very wealth that made Spain untouchable would be the very thing that destroys it. The question isn't just how Spain reached this peak, it's why it couldn't hold on. This is the rise and fall of an empire that touched the edges of the world and discovered that even the mightiest empires eventually crumble. Ready to uncover the untold story of Spain's empire? Let's dive in, starting now. Our story begins with two people who probably never imagined they were launching a global empire: Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. When they married in 1469, it wasn't romance. It was strategy. Two kingdoms becoming one, ending decades of civil war that had bled Spain dry. But their real masterstroke came in 1492. While most of Europe saw the completion of the Reconquista, the final defeat of Muslim Granada, as just another regional conflict, Ferdinand and Isabella understood something deeper. They'd forged not just a united Spain, but a unified mindset, a nation convinced of its divine mission, battle-tested and ready to carry the cross beyond its borders. And then came Columbus. That same year, 1492, a Genoese navigator convinced Isabella to fund his crazy westward voyage. She probably thought she was investing in a shortcut to Asia's spice markets. Instead, she was financing the discovery of two entire continents stuffed with more wealth than medieval minds could even comprehend. Think about the timing here. Spain emerges from centuries of internal warfare, just as the Atlantic reveals its secrets. It's like someone spent 700 years sharpening a sword, only to discover the world's greatest treasure chest right next door. Within 30 years, Spanish conquistadors would topple empires that had ruled for centuries. Hernán Cortés would capture Tenochtitlan with just 600 men. Francisco Pizarro would destroy the Inca Empire with even fewer. Not through superior numbers, but through steel, horses, disease, and an absolute conviction that God was on their side. By 1535, Spain controlled more of the Americas than all other European powers combined. But this was just the beginning. Now, let's talk about what really built this empire. Silver. Mind-blowing. Economy-wrecking. World-changing amounts of silver. In 1545, Spanish prospectors discovered something that would reshape global economics: the Cerro Rico, the rich hill of Potosi in what's now Bolivia. This single mountain would produce roughly 60% of the world's silver for the next 2 centuries. We're talking about 40,000 tons of silver flowing out of one location. To put that in perspective, that's more silver than had existed in all of Europe before Columbus sailed. Zacatecas in Mexico was another silver bonanza, discovered just a year later. Spanish treasure fleets began making regular runs across the Atlantic, carrying so much silver that the Spanish peso de ocho, the famous piece of 8, became the world's first truly global currency. You could spend a Spanish silver coin in London, Constantinople, Beijing, or anywhere in between. But here's where the story gets interesting and darker. All this wealth came at a horrific human cost. The mines of Potosi operated through the Mita system, forced labor that condemned tens of thousands of indigenous people to work in conditions so brutal that many never saw daylight again. It was, quite literally, built on the bones of empires Spain had destroyed. And here's the economic paradox that would haunt Spain. All that silver actually made Spain poorer. When you flood Europe with precious metals, you don't just get rich, you get inflation. Prices in Spain quadrupled during the 1500s. This price revolution meant that Spanish workers could afford less, even as their king became the wealthiest ruler in history. Spanish silver was financing wars across Europe, but Spain itself was becoming economically dependent, importing basic goods instead of developing domestic industry. They were like someone who wins the lottery, but forgets how to work. Rich in the short term, vulnerable in the long run. Enter Charles V, possibly the most powerful ruler in European history. When he inherited the Spanish throne in 1516, he didn't just get Spain. Through a web of strategic marriages, he controlled the Holy Roman Empire, the Netherlands, parts of Italy, and all those new American territories. His realm truly was one on which the sun never sets. But Charles was also inheriting a nightmare. Imagine trying to rule territories spread across 4 continents with 16th century communications. A message from Madrid to Mexico City took months. From Mexico to Manila, even longer. Yet somehow, Charles and his bureaucrats built the first truly global administrative system. They created the Council of the Indies in Spain to govern American territories. They established viceroyalties, essentially mini-kingdoms, in Mexico and Peru, run by viceroys who wielded almost royal power. They even figured out how to run trade routes across the Pacific, connecting American silver with Asian luxury goods through the famous Manila Galleon trade. When Charles abdicated in 1556, his son Philip II inherited this vast machine and tried to perfect it. Philip was a different kind of ruler, methodical, bureaucratic, deeply religious. He moved Spain's capital to Madrid and built the massive El Escorial Palace, part monastery, part royal residence, all symbol of Spanish power and Catholic devotion. Under Philip, the Spanish Empire reached its absolute peak. In 1580, he pulled off the ultimate dynastic coup, claiming the throne of Portugal. Suddenly, one man ruled not just the Spanish Empire, but also Portugal's territories in Brazil, Africa, and Asia. For 60 years, the Iberian Union meant that virtually all European overseas territories were under one crown. Think about the logistics of this. Philip II was simultaneously managing silver mines in Peru, silk trade in the Philippines, wars in the Netherlands, naval battles against the Ottomans, and religious conflicts across Germany. It was governmental multitasking on a scale never attempted before. But Spain's empire wasn't just built on gold and silver, it was built on faith. Specifically, an absolute, unwavering conviction that Catholic Christianity represented the only path to salvation, and that Spain was God's chosen instrument to spread it. The Spanish Inquisition, established in 1478, wasn't just about religious purity, it was about political unity. In a kingdom still dealing with former Muslim and Jewish populations, religious orthodoxy became the glue that held the empire together. Under Philip II, the Inquisition had incredible power, censoring books, conducting trials, executing heretics in public spectacles designed to terrify and unite the population. This religious mission justified everything. When conquistadors destroyed Aztec temples and built Catholic churches on their ruins, they weren't just conquering, they were saving souls. When Spanish armies fought Protestant forces in the Netherlands, they weren't just defending territory, they were defending the true faith. The most dramatic example came in 1571 at the Battle of Lepanto. A Spanish-led Christian fleet faced off against the Ottoman navy in the Mediterranean. When the Christians won decisively, capturing 117 Ottoman galleys, it wasn't just a military victory, it was proof that God favored Catholic Spain. Philip II saw himself as the defender of Catholic Europe against Protestant heretics, and Muslim infidels. When Elizabeth I of England supported Dutch rebels and authorized pirates to attack Spanish shipping, Philip didn't just see political opposition, he saw a spiritual crusade. This religious conviction gave Spanish forces incredible morale and cohesion. Spanish tercios, their innovative infantry formations combining pikemen and musketeers, dominated European battlefields for decades. They weren't just soldiers, they were crusaders fighting for the one true faith. But this same religious intensity also made Spain inflexible. While other European powers were learning to balance religious and political concerns, Spain remained locked into a worldview that saw compromise as betrayal of divine will. By the 1580s, cracks were showing in the Spanish colossus. The problem with ruling the world is that you have to defend it from everyone who wants to take it from you. Spain was fighting on too many fronts. The Dutch Revolt, which began in 1568, was draining Spanish resources and manpower. What started as a protest against Spanish taxes and religious persecution became an 80-year war that would ultimately cost Spain the northern Netherlands. Meanwhile, French kings kept probing Spanish defenses in Italy and the Pyrenees. The Ottoman Empire, despite Lepanto, remained a threat in the Mediterranean, and now England, Protestant England, was actively supporting Spain's enemies, while English privateers like Francis Drake were raiding Spanish shipping. Philip II's solution was characteristically ambitious: eliminate the English threat once and for all. In 1588, he assembled the largest naval force the world had ever seen: 130 ships carrying 27,000 men. The Spanish Armada was supposed to pick up additional troops from the Netherlands and invade England, deposing Elizabeth I and restoring Catholic rule. Instead, it became a catastrophe. English naval tactics, superior ship design, and brutal storms combined to destroy Spanish naval prestige. Of the 130 ships that set sail, barely half returned to Spain. Thousands of men were lost. But the deeper problem wasn't military, it was economic. Despite all that American silver, Spain was going bankrupt. Philip II declared bankruptcy 4 times during his reign. The problem was that silver wealth had made Spain lazy and dependent. Instead of building industries, they imported everything. Instead of developing domestic capabilities, they relied on American mines worked by forced labor. The Spanish economy had become a machine for converting indigenous lives into European luxuries, with Spain as the middleman taking a cut. When inflation reduced silver's value and continuous wars demanded ever more resources, the whole system began to strain. Spanish soldiers in the Netherlands were going unpaid, leading to mutinies that undermined military effectiveness. The famous Spanish Road, the overland route that moved troops from Italy to the Netherlands, was becoming impossibly expensive to maintain. Despite these mounting problems, Spain's century of dominance left an indelible mark on world history. Spanish became the first truly global language, spoken from Argentina to the Philippines. Catholicism spread to continents where it had never existed before. Spanish legal concepts, architectural styles, and cultural patterns shaped societies across the Americas and beyond. The Spanish colonial system created new forms of racial and social hierarchy that would persist for centuries. The encomienda system, which granted Spanish colonists rights to indigenous labor, evolved into patterns of exploitation that still echo today. Spanish missions converted millions, while often destroying indigenous cultures in the process. But perhaps most importantly, Spain created the template for global empire. They figured out how to govern territories across oceans, how to extract wealth from distant colonies, how to use religious and cultural unity to hold diverse populations together. Every later European empire, British, French, Dutch, all learned from Spain's successes and its failures. Spain also demonstrated the limits of imperial power. You can conquer the world, but you can't control it forever. You can extract immense wealth, but if that wealth makes you dependent rather than productive, it becomes a weakness rather than a strength. The Spanish Empire of the 1500s was humanity's first attempt at true global dominance. It succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams, then discovered that success on such a scale carries costs that can't be paid with silver alone. So, was Spain's dominance in the 1500s inevitable? Or was it always unsustainable? Looking back, we can see both the brilliance and the blindness of Spanish strategy. They united a fractious peninsula, harnessed religious fervor for political unity, built administrative systems that spanned the globe, and created the world's first truly international economy. But they also became prisoners of their own success. Silver wealth made them dependent on forced labor and resource extraction rather than innovation and productivity. Religious certainty made them inflexible in a changing world. Imperial ambition stretched their resources beyond any sustainable limit. The Spain that dominated the 1500s teaches us something profound about power. It's not enough to acquire it. You have to know how to use it wisely. Every empire writes its own rise in the language of conquest and ambition, but every empire also writes its own fall, usually in the same language. Spain's golden century reminds us that even the mightiest empires are human creations, subject to human limitations. The sun that never set on the Spanish Empire would eventually set, as it always does. But for one extraordinary century, Spain showed the world what global dominance looked like, and what it cost. The question isn't whether Spain's empire was destined to decline. The real question is, what can we learn from watching the world's first superpower discover that ruling the world is easier than ruling it well? Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Capital Compass, so you won't miss any future deep dives into the forces shaping our world. See you in the next video.